All right. Good morning and welcome everybody to the Never Stop Healing podcast. This is your host of the day, Cade Archibald, and I am stoked to be here with everybody. We got a really cool show we're going to be diving into today. Before we jump in on that, want to cover a few, just cover what we talked about last night in our Health Accelerator challenges, or the hack. If you're not a part of that community, go to acueastwest.com/hack and join those every Wednesday. We've changed the time to 5 p.m. We've had a few instances where it's cutting it too close to patient time. And so we moved it back a little. So hopefully you guys get that memo. The reminders have updated and changed, but every Wednesday at 5 o'clock, we have our weekly meeting or weekly meetup and have some cool challenges we go over, as well as some training and content on accelerating your health. Last night, we talked about some really, really cool stuff on the challenges to eat, try out some organ meat, at least one meal this week between now and then. Have some liver, some heart, some kidney, or some sort of organ meat. Really nutrient dense and some great stuff. So that is your challenge. All right, he made it.
The Zoom gods let me in finally. They locked me out. They're like, "We need a security code." I'm like, "Security? I don't know the security code." So I had to do a bypass, but I'm here.
Well, we talked about the hack last night, their challenge of getting some organ meat in for the week. So that is the big challenge. So let's jump into today's topic.
Okay, so a couple things we're going to talk about, and well, this will layer into from the hacks last night, but some interesting things can happen in your life when you start thinking about health as being timeless. Because my patient that I met with yesterday, who's 80, he said he's got this he's single, but he's dating right now, and he's got this woman who's 42, and she looked at him and she said, "You know what?" He said, "I'm 80. What do you see in me?" And it was really cool because she looked at him and she said, "Age is just a number. It has nothing to do with how much I love you or don't based on your age." And so it was really cool because he has this opportunity to really rebuild his life, and he's kind of in this transformation at the age of 80, when most people are kind of putting their bags away and just like kind of waiting for life to kind of finally come to an end. He's just starting. And so I think that's the beautiful thing in the Timeless Health series. We're talking about a concept and one of the mindsets as we're going through each one of these, but one of the concepts that Dan Sullivan has brought up is that ignorance, isolation, and insecurity are three things that can keep people really in the dark. And so if we can remove these, that is amazing. And I think we have Andie coming on. So if you can get Andie on as panelist and she can lend to the conversation, that'd be awesome, because we enjoy having Andie with us. So in this process, if you think about what's going on here, and no surprises, we have this policy at East West, and our policy is we don't want any death by surprises. And if you think about the surprise death that hits people earlier and earlier these days, it's heart disease, it's heart attacks. 50% of people who have a heart attack, the very first symptom is death. And, we're seeing people younger and younger having it. I met with a patient just on Tuesday, and 28 years old, had a cardiovascular event. And, her sister has had one, and it's really a lifestyle issue. And that's where, if you look at all the chronic disease in the United States, the National Institutes of Health has suggested that 95% of chronic diseases are lifestyle related, which means they're preventable. And what's also interesting is the Mayo Clinic did a study, and they actually identified all of what they consider to be healthy lifestyles and they surveyed people, and 80% of people felt like they lived a healthy lifestyle. But then when they looked at the criteria of the Mayo Clinic, it was actually 5%. And NPR published this and really did a huge radio show on it a few years back. But only 5%. It's like, maybe it's actually less. It was almost 3% was actually the number. But what are your thoughts on that, Andie? I mean, that's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Well, you actually described my father. At 52, he died of a massive coronary, and that was his first symptom.
Death. Wow.
And while I'm aware of a genetic component within my family, because my mum had triple bypass surgery, 20 years before she passed away, there is a genetic component. But, my dad was overweight. He was a smoker. He loved his beer, so there was a huge lifestyle component there. And yeah, he died at 52 and left a young family behind.
Wow. Yeah. And it's tragic. I mean, if you think about that, what if your dad could have prevented that? I mean, he could still be alive right now, and you could still
he could have prevented that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is where, on our watch, anyone in our programs, there's no death by surprises. So and that's what we're going to be diving into today is how to prevent that. Because if you think of ignorance, number one, the biggest mindset here is your future is accelerated. So if you think of health and in our timeless health concept, the big thing about it is thinking about all those things in the past that are interferences. And so, Andie, if you think of interferences that you've let go as your health has gotten better and better, since I've known you, your health has just accelerated.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it had accelerated even before our relationship. But what are the things that you had to let go in your past, like, chemicals, traumas, stress?
For me, the big thing that I've let go of that I didn't even realize had an emotional component, I thought I just liked chocolate. And I mean, sure, I do, but I thought I ate it because I liked it, and it's, all the delicious things about chocolate. But for me, it wasn't just about, quote, the taste. It was an emotional connection. I was eating memories. I was eating happy memories of when my granddad lived with us. And he occasionally, like maybe twice a week, he would put a treat on the table. And being a Kiwi, I used to love it when it was chocolate fish, which was a raspberry marshmallow shaped fish that was covered in dark chocolate. So for me, and, I started to realize, and this has really only been in the last couple of years, that how I feel or how I felt when I was reaching for those treats, it wasn't just about the taste and wanting a snack. It was about eating happy memories.
That's a big realization. Holy.
Yeah, it really was. And it's enabled me to let go of sugar. I don't eat, I eat this much compared to this much.
Right. Yeah. Well, I used to be the same. Like once you broke the seal, then it was like, well, that was good, but what about this? And how about that?
Yeah.
And
also knowing how my body feels without sugar is awesome. So the payoff of giving that up for me now, knowing I don't have any joint pain, and there's so many things I've let go of that I'm like, nothing, there's no chocolate that is worth that to me, so the payoff, finding out the why, having the aha moment, and now the payoff, I'm never going back.
Yeah, it's so amazing, isn't it? I mean, and if you think about that, one of the things that chocolate was doing for you is, I mean, not only was it giving you a blanket, but it was also preventing you from creating a bigger future for yourself. And you probably didn't even realize it because you're going back into the nostalgic land, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it was interfering with your ability to say, maybe there's actually a better future out there. Something is bigger, better, happier. So that's, I think one of the big things is sometimes we can be in ignorance and not even realize that we are slowly, it's this kind of Japanese torture philosophy, death by a thousand cuts, and we're slowly cutting ourselves and not even realizing it. That's
Yeah.
maybe a little bit morbid, but I'm going to ask each one of you on the show today, and for those of you who listen in the future, but what ignorance can you remove? What are the things, what are the areas of your health that you're just not sure of? I mean, how many of you have actually looked at your cardiovascular system? How many of you have done your genetic testing? How many of you have looked at your stool to see if there's interferences from infections or, you know, mold toxicity? Or, you know, how many of you actually have looked at the interferences from chemicals? You know, I think a lot of people downplay what chemicals can do. And when I say chemicals, I mean like artificial flavors, sweeteners, I mean food that's processed, even healthy food. You know, you go get the keto snack and it's like, it's keto, it must be good. And it's all packaged up, and keto can be absolutely just as garbage as a Snickers bar. And in some cases, I would argue that Snickers bars are probably better for you because it's got more natural ingredients than some of the keto stuff that I've seen on the shelves. And so I think there's some interferences that happen because we're ignorant. And so how many of you have some areas that you'd like to actually like shine a spotlight on when it comes to your health? And maybe, you know, like Andie, you brought up a good point, because how many people that you work with in your health coaching have big emotional interferences that they're not even aware of?
My immediate response is 100%. You know, maybe not that high, but it is very common, and it's amazing to have those conversations. And I did an orientation with someone this week, and he had a realization in the orientation. He said, I didn't even know I was doing that. And I said, my work here is done, you know. So
Right.
it's asking the right questions and having, you know, that self-discovery and enabling that self-discovery for, you know, my health coaching clients. And so it is very, very common to have those behaviors and patterns, you know. Do we call it human nature or human habit? You know, that we go down that rabbit hole and we don't even realize it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and this is where one of the books that we recommend to everyone who's in a program with us is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And if you've got my book, Never Stop Healing, we talk a lot about, in the very beginning, we kind of set the stage, Ann and I do, on identifying with who you want to become. And that's really important. If you can identify that, sometimes just identifying yourself as somebody who doesn't eat sugar, doesn't drink alcohol, you exercise every day, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, even if it's somebody who is, you know, you go to bed at 9:30, you go to bed at 9:30 at night, you wake up at 5:30 in the morning, you're a great sleeper. You know, that's a big part in our first, you know, our 60-day reset. You're someone who is hydrated, but identifying with yourself is the first key. But sometimes in identifying with that future version of yourself, you look into the past and you say, oh, wow, there's a lot of areas that I was ignorant that I was doing, like I was staying up too late. And I thought, oh, maybe I can just watch another Netflix series. You know, if this resonates with you, and instead of just turning off the TV or just not turning on the TV at all. I actually find that my Achilles heel is I just don't even get around the TV because it distracts me. And so I've just said never my entire adult life. I've never been involved in that. I'll watch series occasionally, but that's about it. But then the other thing is with things that are like crunchy and salty, like if I break the seal, then it's like a tsunami that just overcomes me. So, you know, getting rid of those things has been really helpful for me. So I think, you know, I would recommend, and I'd say, you know, if you can identify those interferences right now, and the sooner you can remove those, it's almost like baggage. And if you think of a hot air balloon, one of the things that happens when it lifts off is it has all this energy. Have you ridden a hot air balloon, Andie?
No, I went to once in Sydney when I was living there, and it was cancelled because there was too much wind. We drove all this way to go and do this hot air balloon thing, and it was cancelled. So no, I haven't. Have you?
Oh man, I did it a couple of weeks ago. My wife, it was a gift for me that Jess got me, and it was amazing.
Up in Park City?
We did it in the Heber Valley.
Oh, how beautiful.
it was so gorgeous because the views of Timpanogos, of Deer Creek, we could see our house from the hot air balloon, but
Oh,
it's a peaceful experience. And you know, we kind of use the hot air balloon in our Accelerate Wellness program. It's kind of like that's our philosophy, is where there's a gentle takeoff. And then when you're in the air in a hot air balloon, and this was just conceptual when I first created that image, you've seen it on our on the documents that we send our new members, but I guess I've never really clarified why we use that. But I always conceptualized, and I'd read about hot air balloons, and that was actually the first, those were the first hovercrafts. I mean, that's what humans got off the ground and stayed off the ground the longest, in hot air balloons. It actually started in the late 1700s in France. And you know, farmers thought that these hot air balloons were aliens or some weird creatures. And so when they, because it was all this smoke, because they had this big fire, and then it would just launch it up in the air, and they'd go a couple hundred feet and land in some random farmer's, you know, field. And then the farmers would come out with pitchforks. And so they bring a bottle of champagne to say, hey, we're not some devil creature, and we're just, we actually just took flight, and it was amazing. But
yes, we come in peace.
we come in, yes, that was the message of the champagne. But in health, you know, I see a lot of it where, you know, we want a rocket ship launch, and we want everything handled right in the beginning, and you're 30 days into your program, and you're like, why am I not 100% better? And so I use that hot air balloon analogy because it builds up energy first, and you've got to inflate the balloon. And that's the analogy of getting rid of the ignorance, making some transformations, no more isolation, no more insecurity. And then all that energy starts to build. And that's similar to the detox we get patients on. We start resetting the HPA axis. We get the stress out of their body. We start removing some of those habits that are not supportive. And then the balloon has enough air where it can actually start to accelerate. And once you're in the air, it's a really cool feeling, because you're just suspended in this little basket. And the way that you can dictate where the hot air balloon goes is the pilot will spit off the side of it, which is kind of weird. But you can see, he had us spit too, but you see where the saliva goes, because there's little wind patterns. And so at one altitude, the wind may be going this way, but it's opposite at another altitude. And so that's how they can predict how he can carry us across the valley when there's virtually no wind. So it's just like, it's cool, isn't it? It's just
Yeah.
and then the landing's very gentle, but it's very targeted, very specific. And I look at the Accelerate Wellness programs as being something that's intended to gently take your body from one level of healing to the next, to the next, to the next. But what keeps the balloon energized are the things that you do in your day-to-day life. And that's where Andie puts a lot of energy into the balloon, because it's problem solving. It's getting those interferences out of the way, so that people can actually heal.
Yeah. And also getting people to see things with fresh eyes.
Yes.
You know, and you know, like you said, people will get to day 30 and they're like, why am I not feeling better? Because they were, you know, it's about managing expectations, but also for people who feel frustrated at day 30, I always remind them, it took you a long time to get here.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, healing is a process, and it's a lifestyle.
Yes.
You know, it's not a 30-day fix.
Yes, it's not, but it is a lifetime fix. That's the beautiful thing, is you're creating a lifetime relationship with your health in brand new ways. And so we've got a couple of questions that have come in, so I'll answer those. And it's really good to have everyone on. Bring in your questions. Oh, Ruth, good to have you on. My friend Ruth is on, and she missed the peptide talk yesterday. The replays, I don't know that we will be doing any replays on those. And then Ruth is getting started on our next phase of peptides. Yay, Ruth. She's very excited. So good. And then Julux. I apologize. I don't know the name, but put in your name if you want us to give you a shout out. But anyway, Julux, you know who you are. I'm still kind of wondering about dairy. Since me and my daughter have cut out dairy, switched to almond milk, our hair is much less healthy. I'm low on vitamin D, and it's hard to get my daughter enough protein. Any thoughts? Now, this is a great question, because I love dairy, and dairy has really been demonized. And for a lot of years. And there's good reason for it, because some dairy is actually super pro-inflammatory and it can cause massive reactions in the body. And so a lot of us, we switch to soy milk or nut milk and thinking we're doing our body some good, but actually those milks a lot are far more processed than some of the more natural dairy. So we'll jump into some dairy that could be actually really good for you. And especially if you have thyroid issues, almonds and almond milk specifically, you want to look out for the emulsifiers, because, you know, Andy, how sometimes you drink those nut creamers and they're really good. It's like, oh, tastes like milk.
Right. I've actually never tried them.
Oh, good for you. Well,
Yeah.
they're actually pretty tasty. I do like some of the nut pods, but you have to be very careful, because you're going to see that the emulsifiers actually can really disrupt your gut biota. And I have a whole, we've done an entire health accelerator challenge. We've done a few on emulsifiers themselves, but you've got to look for carrageenan. That's going to be problematic in those nut milks. And then you're right, there's just not the natural ingredients, there's not the natural nutrients that you're going to get in dairy. So let's talk about the big difference in dairy to avoid, because this goes along with our interference, and removing ignorance is a big one. So if you look at dairy, there's A1 and there's A2 proteins. And Cade, do you like dairy quite a bit?
Oh, yes.
I mean, there's, and we'll talk about cheese, and I won't make this all about dairy, but we could literally spend an hour just chatting about dairy. But here's the beautiful thing is, if you get the A2 proteins, for most people, it's much easier to digest, to assimilate. If you have ever gone to Europe and you're like, my stomach feels really good when I eat the bread there and when I eat the dairy. I come back to America and I eat bread and I eat dairy and my skin flares up and I feel like crap and I've got gas and all these things. So the A2 protein is really what you want to look for. But most of the milk in the United States, well, first of all, it's pasteurized. And so when you pasteurize milk, you heat it up and you're essentially killing all the microbes. And that's good for certain reasons. I mean, as far as mass production goes, if you have kind of sloppy practices when you're milking cows, it's not great. But man, if you look at when you pasteurize milk, first of all, calcium, which is such an important mineral in milk, calcium needs to be ionized. And when you heat it up, that calcium bicarbonate becomes calcium carbonate, and your body just can't break up that calcium molecule. So I see a lot of patients with osteoporosis, and they're like, I've been drinking milk my whole life. And I'm like, well, what kind of milk? And they're drinking, first of all, it's from A1 cows. So those are the majority of the Holstein cows that we have in the United States is A1, like 90. I don't know, maybe Cade or Andy, you could do a Google search and say how much dairy is A1 protein dairy from cow dairy versus A2. So first of all, most of the dairy, like 99% probably in America, is that A1. But the second thing that happens when you pasteurize it, you can't break down the calcium, and you can't really get the good vitamin D, the cholecalciferol. So I think that's, this is a big thing that you want to look at when it comes to dairy. So avoid the dairy that you're going to go buy at Walmart or other places, even if it's organic. A lot of times it's the A1 protein and it's been pasteurized. So in general, just avoid 99% of the dairy you run into. So that doesn't give us any solutions though, does it, Andy? It's just kind of like, well, great. Thanks, Regan. That was really helpful. Just told me not to drink milk, but told me to drink it. So
yeah.
Here's the other thing. I did a lot of research in my undergraduate work and in my graduate work at my Chinese medical college in Hawaii, and on the bubonic plague. And they found that the farmers who actually had milk cows didn't get infected. So, that was a time where with the bubonic plague, a third of Europe's population just completely was destroyed. I mean, death. I can't imagine how many people, like what that would have looked like, but the people who had access to raw milk had more immunity. And so they found that that was interesting. So you're going to get some immune properties if you drink the right milk. So the cows in Europe are primarily A2, so it's a different type of cow. And so when you get dairy, and Jules, this is really going to be the key thing for you, is I would switch away from almond milk, nut milk, soy milk, all those milks, because so many of them, unless you're milking it, unless you've got your almonds and you're grinding it and you're making your own juice, it's just, they're really going to be too processed. And so you want to get raw A2 milk. And Redmond's Farms, Redmond's are, the patients of ours, we have their lovely pickleball juice with the Redmond salts in there. They do it right. Their cows are very well taken care of, and you can get A2 raw milk, non-pasteurized, at Redmond's Farms. Is great. And then even at Natural Grocers, they have some A2 milk that they brought in from Colorado. So Jules, I'm not sure where you live, but I would find some A2. And if you cannot find A2 cow milk, then there's the most resilient four-legged creatures on the planet, in my opinion, are goats. And so I love goats. Andie, have you been to Hawaii?
No, don't.
Oh, okay, well, it's right on your way to New Zealand and Australia. You're flying right over it. I mean, you
Well,
got
kind of, yeah.
kind of. That's true. I guess depending on what route you go.
Yeah, we can hang a left.
Yes. But Cade, you've seen the goats there in Hawaii, right? Climbing on trees.
Oh yeah.
So goat milk is A2. So I love goat milk just because I think if there's ever a nuclear disaster, it's going to be cockroaches, goats, and lawyers will be all that's living.
Michael survived me.
You're okay. That's a joke for all your lawyers. Your husband's great, by the way. But yeah, Andie's husband's a lawyer, so
he's not like the other.
Watch out.
He's not like, no, he's a very he's a great lawyer. But bad joke. But anyway, but yeah, so the goat milk is really amazing. And one of the cool things that you can do if you like the flavor is even getting raw goat milk. And Cade, you used to do some undercover. You'd have to go to the farmer's market and get goat milk in St. George. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think they've since changed the laws on it, but it was, I think, 2013. So my son Jace, we had kind of finished breastfeeding, and any milk was just he would like projectile vomit. It was pretty crazy. Even like formula, anything was pretty rough on his stomach. And my wife had kind of stopped producing, and so breastfeeding wasn't an option. And so we started looking into goat's milk, and we would have to go to the farmer's market, and we would like talk to this certain lady, and we would pay her some money for some goat's milk, and then she'd tell us where it was. We'd have to walk over, and it was in the back seat of a car, and like a cooler and everything, and in these mason jars. And so we'd take these mason jars of goat's milk. So
I love this. It's so covert.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
Like, they're like, who do you work for? You'd have to tell me if you're a government agent before. And so we had to do this whole undercover process just to get some raw goat's milk, because and I think it's changed now where I don't know the whole kind of back end behind it, but I know with farming there are some things that have been updated and changed, and so in small amounts you can get raw unpasteurized milks from farms. But back then it was like you could get none. It was that is illegal.
Yeah. I remember being there a few times with you. I'd be getting duck eggs, and we'd be like doing the back end deal, like counting the dollars. Like it's like a little drug deal going on there with raw goat milk. So Diane gets a quart of raw. Yeah, Diane gets a quart of raw goat milk every week, and they're in Montana. That's awesome. And Allison also mentioned Redmond. So and Allison knows that well, and you may even see her there in town in Heber. So hopefully that answers your question on milk, and we did dive in deeply. And And it really, it goes down to the genetics in the cows, and hopefully in the future we'll have more A2. But in general, just don't overload yourself with dairy. Remember, even if dairy is like super healthy and you're like, wow, the complexity of the carbohydrates and the proteins and the fats are really beneficial. Too much of a good thing is too much. And I love the heavy cream. I think I like to put just heavy cream in my coffee. And that's a really good fat to have in there. It's similar to putting butter in your coffee, but it's got a little sweeter flavor to it. And so there's some great things you can do. But Jules, hopefully that gives you a little better outlook. But one of the things that you want to make sure of is if your daughter starts drinking milk, or dairy, because dairy in general, even the A2, it's just there's amino acids that are shifted. That's the only difference in the structure of the milk. Otherwise it's very similar, but sometimes people get a little more pro-inflammatory reaction from the casein. So typically it's the casein in the dairy that causes people to flare up. And so this is where you can start by adding in some whey protein, see how your body does with whey, and that's a good way to start introducing dairy back into your life if you've been off it for a long time. And then you can slowly start trying a little bit of A2, and but that's it. So yeah, Diane says you have a local dairy company. I'm gonna call, see if they have the A2 proteins. Other than that, I use almond milk. Yeah. So once again, read the label on your almond milk. It can be pretty processed, and if it has the emulsifiers in it, if it tastes super creamy, then just be careful what the source of that creaminess is, because it might be something that's triggering some gut dysbiosis for you. So, all right. So that was a big, did that just remove some ignorance for anyone? Or maybe you feel more more isolated now?
Now everyone's like, wait, I thought almond milk was maybe better than that. And I think, yeah, especially with thyroid, the nut milks and thyroid issues are really not super cohesive, right, Reagan?
That's it. Yeah, especially the almonds. There's a phytochemical in almonds that can downregulate some of the thyroid hormone production. So you can eat 5 or 6, and this, once again, and then you can argue the hormetic argument, and this is where and actually this could be a long rabbit hole, so I won't even go there. But yes, you can eat some almonds and it's not going to kill you. It's going to be great for you. But if you do too much, it's going to be damaging, just like you do too much dairy, even if it's A2, even if it's from the most robust goat that you found on like the side of Mount Timpanogos, 10,000 feet elevation, you went and milked that goat, and you drank too much of that milk, you still could get sick.
I had another question. What about coconut milk? Is that better than almond milk?
Yeah, I love coconut milk. I think it's super tasty. Once again, it's coconut water has a lot of sugar in it, so you got to be careful. But if you're drinking it right out of the coconut, like that is like, don't even touch that. That's amazing. I don't even care if someone tells me it's not healthy. It's the most satisfying liquid ever when you I mean, it's just like it's amazing. So, but I think the problem is with like even coconut milk or coconut water, we have to preserve it, and then we have to ship it all over the country. And so it does change the nature of things. And really, if you look at it from a Chinese medical perspective on food, we look at body types. And so a lot of people will say, well, I'm eating all my leafy greens and I'm doing all these vegetables and I'm drinking my coconut water, I'm doing my vegan cleanse or whatever it might be. The problem is those are all foods that are super young, and they're going to keep your energy really elevated. And that might be good if it's someone who's, kind of been sluggish. But for most of us in today's age, and most people in our community, we need more grounding. Would you say that's accurate, Andie? A lot of the people we work with need more grounding than they need more of a boost. And so, and a lot of people, they want their energy before they get grounded. And we're like, well, you got to have the grounding first, because the electrical wiring doesn't work unless it's grounded properly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I spend a lot of time with people talking about, having a really good morning mindset and a morning practice.
Yeah, that's like that's one of our first six
Yeah,
habits in your
yeah,
reset is do your mindset morning, but getting grounded is also eating foods that are grounding, like thicker, denser foods, like eating some root vegetables, eating some meat that's got some density. We are your challenge for the people in the Health Accelerator community. The challenge is getting organ meats once a week. You know, get some liver, some heart, you know, whatever is tolerable. Put a little bit in your hamburger. We talked about that last night, but these are some really interesting things that you can do to remove interferences is get yourself grounded. And if you think about it from an electrical perspective, if you don't have a ground, then your electricity is going to go everywhere and it's going to shock the wrong thing. And so the other way we can remove ignorance, and I wanted to jump into this just as we're finishing up, and I appreciate the question, Jules, and all of you for participating today. It's been super fun. So really, if you think about some tests, full body scan, I'm going to be presenting. I've got about a half a day that I'll be presenting at a longevity mastermind in Dallas this weekend. And so I'll be learning more about the full body CAT scan. It takes 4 minutes where you can look at everything in your body so fast. VO2 max, if you've not done the DEXA scan, make sure you get your DEXA scan done. It will show you if you have any issues with osteoporosis. It'll show you your fat to muscle ratio so it can make sure you're on the right track. And then you could even get a VO2 max while you're down there. Look at your hemoglobin A1C, your LDL, your insulin, C-peptide, glucose. All the blood sugar markers are really, really important when it comes to removing ignorance. And then another big thing is don't hold off on getting labs. If you haven't had your labs ran and it's been over 6 months, get those ran again and see how you're looking, because you know, just like Andie, you know, like with your dad, I mean, if he was in this community and maybe you know he wasn't at the stage where he probably wanted to confront his health, is that accurate?
very. He when he passed away, like I said, very suddenly, you know, he was a heavy drinker. You know, carrying extra weight, and that's why I was like, you know, he could have certainly extended his life because a lot of it was lifestyle and, you know, the rabbit hole with habits that he'd fallen down. So yeah.
Man, and so you know, if there's anyone that you know of that's out there that could maybe get a little lift out of that rabbit hole, imagine if somebody was able to just connect with your dad in a way that he could resonate with and helped him see a different path in life.
Yeah.
Could have been amazing. So
Yeah.
so I think there's just some amazing things that can happen in your world. So if you have anybody who you know of that needs help, invite them onto the show, send them a link to this this podcast and or YouTube, and then have them reach out. Andie's shared her email here, Andie at AccuEast West, and that's ANDIE, and she can help get testing going. We had a couple last minute questions before we finish up. Linda, hey Linda, good to have you. Larabars are all natural instead of keto bars. So once again, Larabars, they've got about 12 to 15 grams of sugar. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just too much sugar in there, and a lot of that sugar is from dates. But I wouldn't eat a full Larabar. And once again, anything that's packaged, ideally, we want you kind of building your own food, and you don't have to get crazy on it. But in an ideal world, you'd probably do something other than Larabars. And then Allison, does DEXA scan have a lot of radiation, EMFs? It will, because it's that's the technology they're using is more of a CAT scan. It's a very fast process. So from what I've heard, it's going to be about 2 to 3 times more than an X-ray. So yes, it's something a couple times a year I think is amazing for people. Well worth a little bit of exposure to get that insight. So for sure. Great question. Oh, good. Linda says I cut it into small pieces for an after. That's perfect. Yeah, awesome. Look at you, Linda. You got it all figured out. Okay, beautiful. Well, this has been awesome. Cade, Andie, any final words of wisdom or takeaways from today's conversation?
Just a great product to check out that Jenny and I have both recommended to patients is Kajava. It's a great superfood shake, and they also do great snack bars, which only have, from memory, 2 grams of sugar and they're 13 grams of protein. I was just looking at them yesterday because I was just ordering some for myself. So stay
Beautiful.
tuned. I'll tell you next week what they're like.
Beautiful. Awesome. How about you, kid?
Nice. Yeah, I think going, I not a not a ton to add other than yeah, I think just understanding the dairy thing. I thought that was really intriguing. I think dairy's got a really bad rap, and really it's you know, the over processing of dairy is really like it creates a lot of inflammation, and then finding ways to you know, utilize it maybe in moderation. That's one thing that I really enjoy and love. So I thought
Yeah.
that was really good. The A2 protein milk and some of those things really helpful.
Beautiful. Well, this has been awesome. And you know, a lot of my training, you know, goes back 20 years where I was studying Weston Price and Royal Lee from Standard Process, and then, you know, bringing it in from a Chinese medical perspective. So yeah, I think there's some timeless principles here, and hopefully today we've shed some light on some parts of health that you may have been ignorant in. And so, once again, I say that in all due respect. It kind of, I don't mean to be derogatory if it sounds like that, but you guys are amazing. So we'll talk to you very soon. Love you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, team.
All right, we'll see you guys same time, same place next week. Bye bye.